Welcome. This is the Residential Roundup 2021. We have a panel of speakers. We have 4 different presenters today. We're very excited about it. It's all things residential, all things about the market. And to my left, on my screen anyway, is Ryan Lundquist. And at the bottom of your screens, a couple of housekeeping tips. You can raise your hand and throw something in there, or we don't know if we'll respond to it until possibly after each presentation. We'll probably do some Q&A at the end, but you can do Q&A, and it goes to all of the members of the panel if you have any questions that you want to ask. So welcome to the presentation today. Ryan Lundquist is a certified residential appraiser in the Sacramento area. He runs the Sacramento Appraisal Blog, which is a top-ranking appraisal blog in the United States, and he's been quoted in local and national publications, been involved in the realtor associations for more than a decade. He is also a member of the Real Estate Appraisers Association of Sacramento, and his clients include homeowners, real estate agents, government agencies, and attorneys, and he was listed as 100 notable business leaders by Sacramento Magazine this year in 2021. So I'll now turn the time over to Ryan Lundquist.
Good morning, everybody. And, I cannot share the screen. So, there we go. There we go. And I'll be watching the chat box. Let me know in the screen if you can see my presentation. It should be maximized now. Can everyone see that okay? I sure hope so. But my name's Ryan Lundquist, and it's a real honor to be here today. And I have the next 40 minutes. I know, oh my gosh, that sounds painful. This guy's really going to talk that long, but I want to drop some knowledge on you. I want you to walk away with a well-developed sense of what the market's doing, especially if you work in real estate, some tidbits you can share with clients. And my last slide is specifically designed for real estate professionals, things to do to focus business in 2021. So there's a lot of information here. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat. If I see them, or if I don't see them, Joel, you can let me know. But otherwise, if it's too technical, we might have to do that later. You can email me. But we basically have a market that nobody expected to see. All right, we've had one of the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive and competitive markets we've ever had, and that's been during a pandemic, right? Like, raise your hand if you predicted that. No, I highly doubt it, right? And so let's talk through sort of where things are at right now, and go from there. But really, here's sort of a picture of what the market feels like right now. This is a couple of weeks ago, January 2021. This is by Realtor Sandra Schrader. Here's a line of people during a pandemic waiting to see a house in South Sacramento. So just incredible. But let's remember, like I said, here is this market that nobody predicted, but yet here we are. And so let's sort of unpack where things are. In terms of price growth, someone was just talking about price growth in the chat. Here's where we are. Here's the median price from 2019 to 2020 in the region: Sacramento, Placer, El Dorado, and Yolo. You can see, based on the corresponding colors, it really ranges anywhere from 5 to 10% or so. Now, this was some really healthy growth, because for a while in previous years, the market felt like it was slowing down. And let me show you what I mean. Here's a different way to look at it. From 2014 to 2019, these are various counties. This is sort of price growth. And do you see how we were seeing less price growth over time as I show my cursor? That's exactly what the market was doing. It was like we were putting on the brakes, okay? And the market was still going forward, but look at 2019. Most counties were about up from anywhere from 3 to 6% or so. But look what happened in 2020 during a global pandemic. Every single county went up again. Okay, and so it's almost like momentum completely shifted. All right, the brakes started to be applied, really for the past few years. And then this very unexpected market occurred where we saw a complete 180. So isn't that amazing? And here's an astounding image to show what prices have done. Now, this is the weekly median price in the region. And let me explain what's going on. First of all, the 2 squiggly lines down here represent 2018 and 19. Okay, in a normal year, let me show you what a normal year looks like. It sort of, the median price goes up for half the year, and then you see the median price sort of slough for the second half of the year. Now, 2020 wasn't normal, like I said. And so 2020 was going up, and then the pandemic happened. Prices started to dip for a number of weeks, but then prices just went up. And rather than doing this sort of normal slough during the second half of the year, it's almost like we had a spring market during the fall season. Again, prices did go a little flat toward the end, but here we are in black in 2021, starting way above where we should. We're essentially about, it looks like about $30,000 higher than we really should be, but we had this sort of spring season during the fall, and here we are. So is that not incredible, or am I just a nerd? You be the judge. But let's break down the region in Sacramento. How, when we look at the entire region, Sac, Placer, Yolo, and El Dorado, over the past year, how much cash was there? Well, 11.4%. This surprises people, and I'll get to that in just a sec. FHA, 14%. VA, 5.9%, and conventional, 66.4%. So conventional was the dominant form of financing, 2 out of every 3 sales. And so if you work in real estate, what I want you to do is to look at these numbers and make sure that you're aware of programs that loan officers are pitching, and make sure you're aware of programs that your borrowers can get into, okay? But here's cash. You can see since from 2013, cash has really dramatically declined. Cash is not much of a factor in today's market. Okay, now the narrative is that Bay Area cash is winning everything, and I would say the stats do not support that. All right, but here's where cash is winning. Okay, cash is winning during conventional financing, when a property gets into contract and then the appraisal comes in lower, and then someone brings in extra cash to pay above the appraised value. And so that's where cash is powerful. If you're a buyer in today's market, you simply have to have some cash on reserve, most likely, in order to deal with that dynamic. All right, here's FHA, definitely down from where it was 10 years ago. And VA, it's been very steady. This is good news for our veterans. Not dynamic, but still 5-6% of the market. Here's conventional. What a change from over 10 years ago. Last quarter, it was 68.1% of the entire market. So again, this is the dominant force in the market. Nearly 7 out of 10 sales are going conventional. But here's the thing. I alluded to before that a lot of times in today's market, we've been hearing about, Bay Area buyers are driving our market. They are the force. And in the chat, let me know, are you hearing that? Do you believe it? Let me know what you think. I would love to get your perception. But here's the thing. It's really easy to sort of blame it on the Bay. Sorry for my cheesy Milli Vanilli joke. If you don't get that, I apologize. Google it. But we so quickly, point our finger at the Bay, and I think what we're doing, we're discounting the power of local buyers, because a lot of markets across the country right now are really aggressive. They're just like Sacramento. And so I would ask you, if you're saying that it's all the Bay here, well, is the Bay Area making, South Lake City hot? Is the Bay Area, making, Tucson or Phoenix hot, or, Austin? I would say most likely not. And so let's realize that the Bay Area, there's increased migration right now, but mortgage rates have made local buyers incredibly hungry. And in our narrative, let's not forget to realize that local buyers are still the dominant force here, okay? Here's a cool way to see the market. This is days on market, where you can see the black bars through every year represent September through December, okay? And so every year, like clockwork, it takes longer to sell. Besides, look what happened this year. This year was not normal during the fall season. It actually took less time to sell all throughout the fall. And so it bucked the normal seasonal trend, all right? And so that's the type of market that we've had. It's been atypical. It's been abnormal. Those are really good words to describe it right now. Here's a look at days on market. How long did it take to sell? Well, last year in Sacramento County, the average days was 24. You can see that's down from the previous year, but the median days is 8. And what median means is that basically half of all sales in the entire market took 8 days or less to sell. And so this is really the lowest number since this stat's been tracked for about the past 15 to 17 years. And so this is profoundly aggressive, definitely down before, but look at September through December, it got even lower, 7, 6, 7, 7. And so we've had a market on our hand that has been moving very, very quickly. And so it's almost like, buyers need to be, waiting on those listings. And as soon as something comes to the market, they've got to be ready to decide. There is no time to wait. You've got to jump on it right away. So here's a growing segment of the market, though, the $1 million market. Now, when we look at the $1 million market, here's from 2003 through 2020, this yellow line represents the percentage of $1 million sales, or in other words, it shows this percentage in the chart here. And basically last year, 3.6% of all sales were million. Okay, and so the bulk of the market is obviously not $1 million, but this has been a growing segment. And so I would just say, as you look at your book of business, make sure that you diversify and get into markets that are growing. Okay, I have down here that 51.3% more $1 million sales over the entire year. And so we saw profound growth. All right, but here's an interesting thing, because when we look at the past year, I feel like there's two markets, the entire year, but then there's also the past 6 months. Okay, the past 6 months or so was when the market got really, really crazy. And this graph right here, it basically shows, 7 months technically, June to December this year compared to June to December last year. And so, for instance, here's above $1 million. Over these past 2 quarters, we basically saw 94% more $1 million sales. Someone says that the sound is lost. Can you guys hear me in the chat? Sound is good. Okay. All right, sweet. I always freak out. I can't see people's faces. It's so weird still presenting like this, but 94% more $1 million sales. Okay. When you think about 75% more, anything above 750,000, there's 75% more sales in that price segment this year. Or I think the hard news for buyers that are trying to afford the market is that under 400,000, there's 20% fewer sales this year. Okay, and so, it's, I'm sorry if it's quiet. I can't control anything. Maybe Joel, if you can jack up the volume overall. I don't have control on my end. I can maybe try to talk a little bit louder though. But what we're seeing is in a market with a lot more multiple offers. Okay, and here's Vinny. It's realtor Angela Gitt. It's her dog, lined up with 24 offers on a property. Now, thankfully for buyers, not everything is getting 24 offers. In fact, the vast bulk of the market is getting 3 offers or less. About 75% of the market has 3 offers or less. And I know that sounds crazy because it seems like everything is getting, 10 to 20. It's really not true statistically, even though it feels that way. All right. But here's a look at sort of the dynamic of today to show how aggressive it actually is. Now, here's December 2019 versus 2020. Here are the number of offers made based on closed sales. There were 108% more offers made this year. And so basically the number of offers more than doubled this year. And so if the market feels like it's twice as aggressive, well, I think we look at stats like this and go, okay, I get that, because it literally is. Okay, but here's closed sales. You can see that closed sales were up 26% this December. It was a really strong December, highest one in recent years. That accounts for some of the reason why there were more offers. Okay, but here's, I think, the big stat. Is that the average number of offers, 3.22 were, when you look at all sales in December, and 3.22 was a number that was the average. Now, some of them obviously got 24, but this is one that I think is astounding because it shows a 66% change from last year at the same time. Okay, look at December 2019. This is normal. This is what it should be like. All right. Let's see, someone asked, do you have a chart showing that most of the people making offer are on the higher end of the income spectrum? You know what, I don't have multiple offers by price range. I didn't create that for this, but I will say that we tend to see the market be more competitive at lower price points. And so the higher the price gets, the less competitive the market is. But I'll say this, the market is super competitive, even above $1 million. And so you have to almost take that with a grain of salt, but it's a fiercer battle under 400,000 especially. And so there are likely to be more multiple offers at lower ranges simply because half the market is fighting for, under 450,000 or so. All right. But here's sort of, I think, maybe some hope for buyers. I know this is crazy. There's all these dots and you're going, what in the world does this even mean? Let me explain this because I think this is where we look at stats and we let stats inform our perception of the market and form what we say. And so this is Sacramento County. I have, images like this for every local county. If you need another one, just send me an email, no problem. But on the x-axis, it shows the number of offers, okay, 0 to 28, okay? And on the y-axis, it shows, the sales price to original list price ratio. You go, okay, what is that? Well, okay, if this ratio is at 100%, that means that the property sold for exactly what it was listed for. All right. In an aggressive market, you have that dynamic where stuff is just selling for whatever it's listed for or even beyond. Now, you can see the bulk of properties sold above the list price last month. But look, there's definitely a host of properties that sold lower. But here's kind of where I want to draw your attention, and I hope I don't lose you here. Just a couple minutes. So look at this. The more offers you get, the higher a property sells above its original list price. And I know you go, okay, duh, thanks, Captain Obvious. That makes total sense. Okay, I get it. But here's the thing to really hone in on, because look, when you go at about 5 to 6 offers or so, look what happens. Properties, you don't see this dynamic change where the market almost starts to look the same. Okay. And so, a realtor, I was talking to Cheryl Smith a few months ago, and, she said, after you get about 5 or so, it seems like a lot of the offers start to resemble one another. Okay. And I think that there's some truth to that generally. We see it in the stats. And so I just want to draw a couple things out of here that, first of all, sellers, you don't need 15 offers in order to command the highest prices. Sometimes you get 5 offers, you're able to get as much as you can possibly get. Okay, are you in the driver's seat if you get 15? Of course. Would I rather have 15? Yes, I would. But technically, according to stats, you don't need that much. Okay, and buyers, you have a fighting chance to be able to get into contract, because just because there's 15 offers doesn't mean that offer number 15 is being selected. In fact, I have seen sellers have to be discerning about the quality of the offer and how strong the offer is, rather than just blindly picking the highest offer out there. And so it's a bloodbath out there. Hang in there, but I think it's hope. Okay. Now here's when we look at last month versus, the same time last year. Check this out. Here are properties that sold below the list price. And I know you're thinking, what? Something sells below the list price? Yes. Even last year in this hyper aggressive market, about 1 out of 10 sales sold below the list price. And keep in mind, last year was more of a normal market. We should have at least 20% or so of properties selling below list price. So the market, again, it's been sort of chopped in half. Or look at the properties, no matter the price point, or the percentage, we're seeing more aggressive numbers this year. Okay, especially when you look at properties that sold 1 to 5% above list. 40% of the market, or 1 to 10%, you have over 50% of sales. And last year it was more like 23%. And so it's like the market, again, it feels twice as aggressive. I have images like this for various price ranges. It's interesting because not every price range shows the same dynamic. If you want those, you can email me. That's no problem. But how many of you in the chat box have heard about a foreclosure wave? Who's heard about that or read articles, or who has clients asking you about that? Chime in there. I'd love to hear kind of what you are seeing out there, because this is a viable question. Is a foreclosure wave coming? And Johnny, yes, clients are asking. Emily says yes. And so I want to give some stats. I want to give some perspective and some things that you can share. Yes, all the time. And honestly, I think when the pandemic first began, that was the narrative. They're like, hey, it's all over, folks. Foreclosure 2.0, housing bubble 2.0, it's about ready to implode. But guess what? Those YouTube gurus predicting the demise of the market, haven't been right yet. Their prophecies have not come true. And so here's what I want to look at. So basically, this graph in Sacramento County, and it's true of the region, it shows REOs, or bank-owned sales, in blue and short sales in red, really over the past 11 years. And we've bottomed out. Look, in the fourth quarter of this year, 0.36% were bank-owned and 0.21% were short sales. So basically, 0.5% of all sales were distressed. Profoundly different from 84% in 2009. All right, and so we don't have any distressed market. I say this because there's basically nowhere to go but up. We have bottomed out. Technically, you can get a little bit lower, but it's hard to do that. Okay, and I think Jeff said, too early to make this call. I agree to a certain extent. Okay, and Steve says, yes, 2022, it's all happening. But here's what's happening with mortgage forbearance, because I think this is a big, ugly beast in the background. This is what we really have to watch. Mortgage forbearance, if you don't know, it's a process, a formal process where a borrower can go to the lender and say, hey, can I be entered into this period where I'm figuring out life and maybe not paying my mortgage, and where I have a little bit of a grace period. And so what happened with forbearance, you can see at the beginning of the pandemic, okay, regardless of the loan type, there was this gigantic increase in forbearance, okay? Particularly Fannie Mae, or excuse me, FHA and HUD, and FHA, HUD, and VA have seen more forbearances. That's what Freddie Mac's stats show. And so I would say that if you're considering past clients, where they're at, what they're dealing with, go back and revisit clients who put very little money down who could be struggling now. But check this out: forbearance, it represents 5.1% of all mortgages are in forbearance. That's 2.73 million loans nationally. And you can see, though, they shot up, but look what's been happening over time. They've been going down in every category. Now, over the past month, some news stories are like, okay, it's up. No, it's down. It's up. And it's like this game of ping pong. Okay. We are in the middle of this. And that's where I think where Jeff said was like, hey, it's too early to make this call. I mean, look, we're in the thick of it. We don't know how this is going to pan out. But for now, we need to watch sort of this ping pong news and understand, but do we see how this trend, this is a positive thing. Now, here are people who have exited forbearance between June of 2020 and just a couple of weeks ago. I don't want to read this whole thing. You can digest it later. Joel will have the PDF. I've emailed it to him. If you email me, I can certainly email it to you too. But check this out. Here's a couple highlights. 28.8% of people who have exited forbearance over the past 2 quarters, they continue to make their monthly payments. Okay, so you have almost 3 out of 10 people who entered forbearance who are actually making every single payment. And so sometimes we look at forbearance stats and go, oh, everything's going to collapse. But we have to realize that, well, that's not true. There are people who enter this process who actually continue to make their payments. 13.5% represented borrowers who did not make all of their monthly payments and exited forbearance without a loss mitigation plan. And so for you, if you work in real estate especially, I would pay attention to this number, because there's this sliver of people, 13.5%, who don't have a plan. They're going to need your professional advice, whether that's a loan modification, whether that's a short sale. Although we're in our 10th year of price growth, a lot of properties they have profound equity. They don't need to sell short, okay? But whatever the advice it is, and whether you're involved in the transaction or not, okay? 7.4% resulted in loans paid off through a refinance or selling the home. I wish we knew how much was in each category, but we don't. But frankly, this is one of the most important things to watch. And I think that when people say that the tsunami is coming, the wave is coming, well, we don't know for sure, but the numbers are going in the right direction for now. Hopefully they continue to go in that direction where we see people, dealing with their stuff. Now, Biden, when he became president, within, the first day, he extended the eviction and foreclosure moratorium to at least March 31st. And I know in California, there's presumably going to be a vote on Thursday to extend moratoriums, an eviction moratorium through June of this year. And so it's something that we're going to have to watch over time. But here's kind of what we're doing. We're having issues and then we're punting down the road. It's like we're kicking the can down the road and, prolonging this effect. Whether that's good or bad, I think, we'll know in a number of years whether this was helpful or not. But I think that we just have to realize, and humbly, that we are in the middle of this. We don't know the full effect of the pandemic on the housing market and on the economy, on the job market. We don't know the long-term effects because we're still in the short term. So how has the pandemic affected both buyers and sellers? So there's a lot of things. I'd love to actually hear what you have to say in the comments, but here's some stuff I would say. People want larger homes. People want more land. They're less interested in condos. People want vacation homes. Divorce seems very common. Every divorce attorney I know is really, really busy. Some tenants are struggling to pay rent. Owners hesitant to list their homes. People need space to work from home. Pools have grown in popularity. I'll show you that in a sec. Employers are letting some workers be at home. And I think the big one is that people are sort of reevaluating their lives, going, okay, what is it that I want to do? Where do I want to be? Who do I want to do life with? And maybe I'm not going to wait until retirement to move. And so it's sort of been a market of making decisions. And so just profound. But here's one thing to consider is that there's inequality in remote work, because we often look at the pandemic and think that, okay, everyone and their mom's able to work at home right now, but that's actually not true. This is put out by Indeed, and it basically shows that the percentage of people able to telework at home, it varies by their education level. And so you can see graduate degrees on top, and all the way down to no high school degree whatsoever. And so I think that this underscores that, the market doesn't feel the same to everyone. And some people are thriving and their stock portfolio is doing really great. And other people are struggling in forbearance and they're thinking, I need assistance with rent. I am having a hard time here. Okay. Inventory has basically been chopped in half. Have you guys noticed? I'm sure you have. So here's the United States, though. Here's the interesting part. So this comes out from Altos Research. Highly recommend you follow them. You can see that there are 388,000 listings, active listings at the beginning of this month, compared to about twice as many the previous year. Now, the interesting part is that we're definitely down from previous years. Okay, we are. We had a housing shortage before this pandemic began, but it's been phenomenal to see this. Okay, and Marlo, there's your screenshot. You got to take it real quick if you want a picture. Joe Exotic didn't get his pardon, so. But here's the Sacramento region, okay? And you can see that this same dynamic in the United States is actually happening in Sacramento. And so remember, what I said is that this hot trend in Sacramento, we're seeing it in many areas of the country, okay? And so we should have about 2,400 listings. We should have had at the beginning of January, but we had literally half. Okay, here's a different way to look at it. In the Sacramento region, 50.2% fewer listings, and sort of I'll let you go by county, but you can see by price range, when we compare last year versus this year, really every single price range is down except $1 million. Above $1 million, we're approaching sort of what would have been normal last year, but keep in mind, we've seen profound growth in $1 million buyers, so this actually isn't close to enough right now. All right, here's inventory. And you can see we're just down at ridiculous levels. And when you think about it on days, 12.4 days of listings right now, or 16, 27, 20. I mean, we really should be about 40 to 60 days easily, but we're just so much lower. But look at this. About 6 months ago, rates went below 3%. And do we see what happened to inventory? And so inventory is way down, but it's not just a pandemic thing. We're not giving enough credit to the power of mortgage rates going below 3% and how wonky it's made the market. Okay, and so I think this is very powerful. Look at El Dorado in gray. It's traditionally way above the rest of the market, but look at this. It's way down right now. Okay. The good news in 2020, we actually saw 4.1% more sales compared to last year. And so here's 2020 in this golden bar, and check this out. More sales compared to last year, down from a few years ago, but this is very positive. And I know some people are like, wait, how can we have more sales when we have, listings chopped in half? Well, here's the thing. When you look at active listings, one of the reasons why listings are so low is because every single month we have hundreds more pendings. Okay. And so pendings aren't counted in the listings number. And so these pendings are closing and we've had higher volume. Okay. There's not enough listings right now because demand is so excessively high. But that's actually a good sign. And so, we'll see what happens there. Here's sort of what a normal year looks like though in the region. This shows, this one green line shows 7 years worth of sales. And so it shows January, here's the average of sales. We start out low and then we start to see more and more sales until typically we top out in June. Okay, like clockwork every year. And then look what happens for half the year. The last half of the year, we see volume slide down. And some people, when I post this image, they say, what's wrong with the market? How come we're not seeing more sales? Well, look, it's very normal. Sort of, there's increased demand and then, people start thinking about school and vacations and, Christmas and Thanksgiving or whatever holidays they celebrate. Okay. But let me show you 2020 compared to this. Check it out. What a difference. 2020 saw this huge dent in volume where the market felt like it was starting to crater for about 4 weeks. And then we started to see volume tick up again. And then look what happened. For the past 6 months, we've had much more volume. And so the past 6 months have basically helped us catch up from this first, COVID dip or COVID lull. Okay. But look what happened. Even in this really aggressive market, do we see this black line? Do we see seasonality? Do we see this descent, a seasonal trend? So this market's really aggressive, but it hasn't trumped the season, okay, in some regards. And so what I would look for you right now when you're looking in January going, we need more listings, we need more listings. All right, more listings theoretically should be on the way. They don't usually hit, kind of like real estate agents say before the Super Bowl, right? Whether that's true or not. But we should theoretically be seeing more in coming months. And so trust the season. A few more things, and then I'll jump into my closing thoughts. But does higher fire insurance still matter? I think this is some really, really cool data. So in El Dorado County, let me show you what's been going on. The entire year of sales, 2019 to 20, there was a 28% increase in sales. Okay, but check this out. Let's compare fire insurance areas versus non-fire insurance. So here's the past 7 months, okay, in El Dorado Hills and Cameron Park. Typically, there aren't fire insurance issues in these areas. Sometimes, occasionally there are, but there was 35% growth. Now, here are areas, everything besides Cameron Park and El Dorado Hills actually saw more substantial growth despite fire insurance. And so it just shows that the market has maybe, gotten used to higher rates. Maybe rates have normalized a bit, but also this whole pandemic thing of I want to move to Shingle Springs or Placerville because I want more land. It's a real thing. It's not just hype. Okay. Am I the only nerd in the room? I think this is really cool. I might talk about this on my blog this week. I haven't shared it anywhere. I mean, take a screenshot, share this type of stuff in your newsletters because buyers are hungry for this. Okay. We had the most new construction over the past 15 years. This is glowing news. This comes from North State BIA. When you get this in person, maybe you can unpack some of the stats. We got to move along. There were 11.4% fewer condo sales this year. And it's not that condos are not popular. They are still moving, but it's just that single family detached home with the backyard with more space has been all the rage compared to feeling more confined in a condo. And so be in tune with what buyers want. Okay, 8.4% more homes with built-in pools sold in 2020. You could see this major uptick in people wanting pools. 3 closing X factors, and I'm going to close with my points. So what things we have to watch: the economy. Okay, here's the unemployment rate in the United States in black. It shot way up when the pandemic began. Okay, and then it's come down. And Sacramento County is in blue. And so this is heading in the right direction. But here's the thing: if you reading articles and thoughts by economists, they're kind of talking about the economy stalling, or or they're concerned about potentially more jobless claims coming. And so we're still in the thick of this. We have to see how it's going to pan out. Okay. One of the other X factors is mortgage rates. It's unbelievable that rates have been below 3%, but they shot up very recently, and 2.77%. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. No, it's not. This is insanely low. But here's the thing: our market never would have did what it did this year. We never would have seen 10% growth in Sacramento County. We never would have seen this market that was clearly decelerating. We wouldn't have seen this acceleration again without the juice of mortgage rates. And so mortgage rates going up is a big deal if this continues to happen, because this essentially softens the market. We are addicted to low rates. We feel it when rates get higher. Okay. Still absurdly low. Don't worry about this for now, but we want to keep an eye on it. The last thing is the vaccination plan. It's a big deal. Whatever happens when in California, and hopefully this vaccine will continue, or start to roll out a little bit more efficiently. But basically, for us to return to normal, we need a vaccine to be effective and implemented. All right. It's hard to imagine normal, whatever that even means anymore, without sort of people being able to resume normal life and feel like I can have, buyers walk through my home. I feel comfortable in all regards, going out there. And so something to watch. But here's some closing thoughts, some quick stuff. Let me jump through these because I know I'm about ready to end my time. You guys are going to kick me out of here. So I'd say be a student of the market so you can spot what is normal versus not. Every single month, ask yourself this question: what does the market normally do in January? What normally happens in February? And know those things. Okay. Adjust your narrative based on stats. Don't be afraid to change what you say if the stats change. Okay. Sometimes we get so locked in, especially for people who work in real estate, and you feel like it's sin to talk about the market in non-glowing terms. Look, if the stats are not glowing, then don't fabricate and spin this narrative that's disconnected from real stats. I'd say find inroads to the growing luxury market. Be on the lookout for opportunities to split lots. Remember, after 9 years of equity, and we're in our 10th year of price growth now, there's opportunities that some owners have with larger lots, splitting them off, whether it's Rio Linda or Midtown or places where this is happening. Okay. Pay attention to the conversation about eliminating single family zoning in Sacramento. This is a big conversation. It looks like it's going to happen. This is a trend nationally we're starting to see pop up. It's happening in Portland this year, going to be implemented in a number of months. It happened in Minneapolis last year. Watch for fallout in the commercial market. Things are really changing in commercial real estate. Build referral partnerships with agents in Texas, Idaho, Arizona, Oregon, all those places where locals are moving, Tennessee especially. Connect with millennials who are at a prime age for home buying and family building. Okay, this is the largest generation now. And so definitely watch for them, but watch for the silver tsunami of aging boomers and people who are in retirement mode, people who want to relocate or downsize, okay, and they're making decisions. Be well prepared for bubble conversations. Find sellers who want to cash out at the top, so to speak, whether we are at the top or not, whether the market changes in the future and does anything like 2005 versus not. If it's in the perception of a seller, then I would say connect with that person. Look for buyers wanting vacation homes deep into Placer and Yolo and El Dorado County. This is a real dynamic. I've seen a lot of local agents begin to, try to specialize in that market. Build connections with pool contractors and landscapers. This is definitely people you want in your sphere of influence. Identify companies who are letting people work from home forever. And so I've listed a few in the parentheses, but that's a clue into people who might need to go there. Chris asked, could I expand on the elimination of single family zoning? Here's basically what it means in a very quick nutshell. In the city of Sacramento, the zoning is wanting to be changed. Instead of allowing one house on one lot, to allow up to 4 units, okay, in every single neighborhood, East Sac or South Sac or wherever you are within city limits. And so it's a it's a huge change, and there's actually racial implications and undoing rights from the past. It's a loaded conversation, and so know the pieces of conversation, but that's it from going from 1 to 4. Parking will be fun, yeah, but hey, same thing with ADUs. ADUs are allowed right now, and it hasn't led to a parking issue so far. Identify who's thriving and not in this economic recovery. Some people are thriving, some aren't, and what are the needs of various clients, okay? Write up contracts for owners who are wanting to sell to tenants. Look for sellers who want to list off market. Find people who are moving money into and out of Sacramento. 1031 exchanges are up. Definitely be a part of that. Help owners and businesses wanting to move out of the market. Find who are the Elon Musks locally who are just tired and who want out of California. And we don't want to be negative, and I can't stand that vibe, but hey, if that's a trend, then ride the wave that's here. That's fine. A few more things. Know how Proposition 19 works. How this affects people. Read absolutely everything about it, of people being able to move to various counties and keep their tax base. And how does that impact heirs also? I have a lot of clients who are asking these questions. Keep an eye on the Bay Area market and be ready for inbound growth. Okay, it has been a thing. LinkedIn published stats showing a 7% more relocations to Sacramento. They didn't specify that was the Bay. I have a strong feeling that was. Don't keep doing the same thing because it won't work in every market. All right, that is just the truth. And the last thing, not related to real estate, but I'd say is grow in character and become a better person. Whether you work in real estate or not, you know what? One of the best things we can do is become better people, because those are the kind of people that I want to work with in the future, whether the market is up or the market is down. So that was me in a nutshell. You can email me, you can email Joel for this presentation. But guys, I hope that was helpful. I know that was a lot, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me get back to, here we go, reclaiming the host. Haha, okay, we're back. Right, Dean Worley is next. Ryan, thank you so much. I always love listening to you, and I appreciate that you come back each year to present, and looking forward to doing this in the future and continuing it. Hey, Dean, will you turn on your video?
I'm trying. Did you send it over to me? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Okay, can you tell me, like Ryan said, tell me if you can see the full screen right now. Yet. Now, can you guys see full screen?
No, not yet.
Uh-oh. What do you see?
You, me.
Oh, no. I think I'm sharing here. Let me try it again.
Will you keep working on it? I'm going to introduce you.
All right.
Dean is a principal at John Burns Real Estate Consulting, which is one of the preeminent real estate consulting companies in the nation. I don't think that's disputed at all. Dean has a PhD from University of California, LA, and a BA in political science from Cal State Fullerton. He manages residential and commercial real estate consulting assignments across the country and has a very deep knowledge of California's Bay Area, Sacramento, and Central Valleys. He specializes in aggregating housing market trends, and he is also the host of the New Homes Insight podcast, where you can see him regularly. So, Dean, on that, I will duck out and leave it to you. Thank you.
Okay, can you see? Because it says I'm sharing my screen, but I see.
Yep, I can see it. Residential RoundUP 2021.
See it? Okay, cool. All right, awesome. Okay, thank you, Joel. And also, thanks, Ryan, by the way. That was pretty impressive. That was a lot in only 40 minutes. That was amazing. I'm going to talk about what Ryan touched on too, is this kind of big shift, this sort of out migration from the Bay Area into Sacramento. And then we'll look at kind of some trends, some projections in terms of new home pricing and new home sales. Then talk a little bit about product and community. That is, what new home buyers are kind of looking for. And my last part will be staying power. By that, I mean couple of things that we think will have legs beyond vaccination, beyond this pandemic. So the first part is just what we all know is happening. There's just this huge flight from kind of this urban core, especially in the Bay Area, and it's mostly being centered on these suburban locations in places like the Upper Central Valley and in, of course, Sacramento. This here is a 4-hour, we hear a lot from some of these tech companies in the Bay have kind of let it be known to their employees that they are okay with them moving to lower price areas. They know they can't stop that, but some of them want you to be kind of not too far from the mothership. We've heard within a 3 or 4 hour drive of HQ. This is centered on the city of San Jose. And that 4-hour drive, I mean, it almost gets to the Nevada border. And of course, and by the way, there is lots and lots of folks in the Bay Area moving to places like Boise and Salt Lake City and Reno and Austin. But for the most part, because of this you see here, by we, I mean Northern California, are keeping most of that out migration from the Bay that, of course, is being fueled by the work from home phenomenon. This is new home sales. I'll explain this briefly. So the black you see here, this is the average monthly sales rate for per new home community for the last 5 years, 2015 through 19. The red is mostly 2020 and a little bit here at the end of 2021. And that is the, again, average monthly sales rate per new home community in greater Sacramento, the 4-county Sacramento MSA. Now, I mean, the key here is one of those things, see what Ryan said earlier, you see that Sacramento typically does have this dip. After about halfway through the year in May and June sometime, we kind of lose interest and those per project sales rates start to go down. That's just normal seasonality. Of course, what happened in real life here is that the sales rates took just a gut punch after the pandemic from about mid-March on, but then pretty quickly recovered. And what I want to show you here, and of course, went into the stratospheric, well above the norm kind of territory that we've been in since about late May, early June. What I want to show you here, this is average new home sales. So this includes all total sales. What happened in real life is that during this period here, we had tremendously high cancellation rates. So I'm going to show you net home sales in just a second right here. What this means though, I'm sorry, I have it backwards. This is net sales. So we got down to incredibly low rates. And a big part of that was cancellations. Cancellation rates skyrocketed. Average home sales, that is all of them, not including the cancellation rates, took the same trend. But what we saw, and I'm not going to overhype myself, but we did see this number start to peak up pretty quickly, even late April. And what that told us is that even this was the doldrums, the worst of the pandemic. And it told us, though, that there's a pretty decent market out there for people who are buying with eyes wide open. They knew that they might lose their job. They knew that the pandemic was raging and that the economy is going to be shut down for quite a while. And they're still out there buying homes. And of course, that was certainly very, very heavily fueled by mortgage rates. But that told us that maybe we're going to come back and the market will rebound quicker than most people thought. So we're right about that. But I won't lie, as Ryan said, I had no idea it would be this nuts for this long and this above average. So in other words, we thought it might come back pretty quickly, but not like it has, and not with the legs that it has. It's just been an amazing recovery. So one of the things driving this, of course, is this flight toward from high density to low density, right? It's from urban areas and also urban denser product into lower density product, less urban areas, into suburbs. One of the ways, by the way, that we think that's not for everybody. A lot of younger households are going to, I don't have a slide for it, but they're going to look at something we call suburban. That is relatively denser housing in more suburban areas there. You haven't seen that dramatically yet, but Sacramento doesn't have a ton of that relatively denser housing. So I think some of those younger buyers who just aren't ready for the big backyard and the pool, I think there's some opportunity there to give them a little bit denser housing than the norms, but in suburban locations, especially where there's any kind of walkability, which I know is hard. But the other factor here is people have been kind of fearful of urban settings, and that's pushed these folks out of places like the Bay Area, or maybe even looking askance at urban locations here within Greater Sacramento as well. One of the things our surveys, though, have picked up is that most of the folks who are most concerned about urbanity are people who weren't living in urban areas already. I apologize for the way these bleed together here, but these are folks who came from an urban location, who were in an urban location. These are folks here who were in a suburban location, and those already suburbanites tend to be the ones driving a lot of this, I'm afraid of urban. So we don't think urban's dead. It's just certainly the appeal is much more towards suburban areas, lower density product. And one of the solutions to that is build for rent, or single family rentals too. So the sector that's been hit really, really hard in a lot of locations has been the apartment sector. This is particularly true in the Bay Area. Places like San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose have experienced double-digit depreciation in their rental sector. One of the alternatives to this is single family rental, which is a booming sector. And this here shows the average total appreciation annually for the single family rental sector. But notice what's in these trends here. You never see it go below 0%. So since 1985, the SFR sector has never had a negative year-over-year price change. That's amazing. It's even, and this is a little dated, but so it's held on much better than the apartment sector has. And I think we'll be seeing more of these build for rents. That is communities, single family home communities that are intended as a build for rent from the ground up. By the way, if you're doing chat, I'm not seeing chat. So if I'm missing you, I apologize. Now let's look at some trends here. What this is, I'll start with new home median price by MSA. What I did here is we'll see Sacramento. I have about 4 slides on this. We'll see Sacramento in this purple line in all these slides. And I showed, for context, I showed the Stockton MSA, which is the San Joaquin County, and then some of the Bay Area MSAs. Again, these are MSA levels. So for instance, the East Bay is Contra Costa and Alameda counties combined. So what it shows here is that, of course, we've had this tremendous price increase in places like Sacramento, and Stockton have enjoyed some pretty strong price increases here. And we are projecting very strong. Look at that. That's our projection for the new home price appreciation in the Sacramento MSA over the next 3 years. So we do not see a foreclosure wave coming. We think the economy is post-vaccination will come out pretty strong. Between you and I think some of these numbers might be a tad aggressive, especially in 22 and 23. We'll see how the economy does. But I hope you can see it by way of comparison. Sacramento is roughly on par with our views on the nation as a whole, which these numbers up here. Notice that we think places, more suburban locations like Stockton and Sacramento will do better than the places with more urban locations for the reasons we just talked about. So we're pretty sanguine on the future here of Sacramento in terms of new home price. The same is true of sales. This is what we're looking at. This is all up through current on sales. By the way, this is the 4 county MSA, so this is going to differ a little bit from the 6 county BIA MSA, that region that Ryan showed a minute ago. But we still, same thing. We are looking for some pretty strong growth in sales. If anything, we're starting to see a lot of builders, or we've seen this now for a few months now. Builders are getting out ahead of new home builders are getting out ahead of their deliveries. So we're actually seeing metering in a lot of new home builders. That is, they're maybe skipping a phase release, or they just do a very small phase release of 2 or 3 homes. So some of those rates you saw, those per project rates you saw that look so good, they could be even better right now and for the last few months if it wasn't for metering and a lack of inventory and a distinct lack of standing inventory everywhere. But even despite this difficulty of bringing supply, we still see the new home sector growing in terms of volumes. The same is true for I'm sorry, I apologize. This was existing home prices right here. Sorry about that, for the Sacramento. So, and it's a similar pricing increase scenario as new home. Here's volumes, I apologize. So here's volumes, and we see Sacramento having increasing volumes 7, 9, and 10% over the next 3 years, including this year. We see a little bit more, they're a little bit more constrained, but if you can find Stockton, see Stockton down here, again, that's San Joaquin County, same story. Much more suburban location, is absorbing so much of that Bay Area out migration that we see Sacramento and Stockton having a pretty good time. Even the East Bay, from places like the Highway 4 corridor, or in the Solano County, places like the Interstate 80 corridor are getting a lot of that out migration as well from those more urban central locations. And we see that here's the existing home sales, and this is our projection for existing home sales. We see it been a little more steady, but still, generally speaking, a modestly positive trend. Jobs. Now this is the same basic idea that Ryan showed. So jobs have come back dramatically, but there is absolutely a stall going on. We're seeing the first-time unemployment going up a little bit lately, the last couple of weeks or so at least. So there is this question now of what's going to happen to the economy. We are pretty optimistic because we think the vaccination works and that kind of reopens the economy pretty dramatically. But I'll be honest with you, whether you like it or not, future stimulus is going to be critical. And it's probably not going to end at $1.9 trillion either. We're going to probably need some more stimulus even after that to get us through, because vaccination is going to take months, not weeks. It's probably not till the summer or even the fall that we're fully vaccinated. And $1.9 trillion is just not enough to get us over that breach. So be ready for that. There's also probably, by the way, there's a crying need in a place like Sacramento for more of that rescue for state and local government, right? There's just a little bit of that in the 1.9 trillion that Biden has proposed. We're probably gonna need more of that for state and local governments to fully recover from the hit they've taken due to the pandemic. So now let's talk a little bit about product and community. So here's this idea, and I'm gonna get to price in a minute, but a lot of folks looked at this rebound and said, a lot of it was driven by people hunkering down, they're quarantining, they're sheltered in place, and they didn't like what they saw. Although I kind of like the color scheme right here. I think that's bold. And this is beautiful. So they looked for new product, they looked for a better product, and that was a big driver of this surge in sales that we have seen. I do think that's partly true. I do think that's part of it. At the end of my section here, I'll get to why I don't think that's a big part of it, but still, it is. And of course, the thing that's opened that up has been this ability to work from home, and the folks who are now working from home and the folks that are looking at their house and maybe wanting more or different have mostly been families. To a little extent, it's been also these mature single and couples, dual income professionals, things like that. Those are the folks that are doing the most in terms of redoing their kitchens and things like that, are remodeling their home and need it the most. So if you're in that sector, I don't know if you are, then those are the folks to focus on. But another thing has been health and wellness. Of course, the pandemic really peaked health and wellness. And certainly both the health and wellness was already a trend. It was already an important thing happening, but this has just really, really heightened it. And we found through, again, our surveys that things like air filtration and purification are important. Easy to clean surfaces are huge. Humidity control, bedrooms designed for restful sleep. This is hugely important and becoming more so. So the more your home can offer that, whether it's an existing home that's retrofitted, or that's one of the things that I think advantages new homes, by the way, is the ability to build this in from the ground up. People are really looking for these health and wellness kinds of factors in their home. They're not so much looking for touchless though. And I kind of quibble with this headline here. This again from our New Home Trends Institute surveys. And I still think there's a lot of folks who do want touchless features like touchless toilets. This thing costs a few $1,000, by the way, by Kohler, but it's amazing. It does everything for you. Soon they'll actually be giving you medical diagnoses. I'm not even making that up from what happens in the bathroom. But things like touchless kitchen faucets and things like that, those are trends. So I kind of quibble with this conclusion here. They're just maybe not as important as things like air filtration and easy to clean surfaces, at least not yet. Another thing is that what folks don't want though, for the most part, is things like embedded sensors that track your health. So we're not looking for that toilet to tell us we might be sick, not yet, but we are looking for things like telemedicine and virtual assistants, and especially things like, see this embedded sensors that detect maintenance issues. We're looking for that. So again, a product is being driven and new homes are being advantaged by the ability to deliver this kind of product. And so this is what I show here. New homes has always had an advantage over, of course, over price of existing homes, although that gap is closing a little bit. It's this innovation though, where new home builders are focusing on, and that they will sort of try to maintain that advantage over existing homes, especially innovations that are difficult to retrofit in existing homes. Now, what do we think has staying power? I think health and wellness will have legs. It'll be a big deal even post-pandemic, even after we're fully vaccinated. But I think the biggest change that is a kind of a permanent change is this work from home. And one of the reasons is people love to work from home. There's all kinds of advantages for working at home. There's some minor inconveniences like sound and noise and privacy and things like that. But for the most part, people really like it. And we're still figuring out where to work from home. Look at this, only about 25% of our respondents from new home shoppers had a formal office in their house. So we're going to see a lot more of that. People are in their dining rooms, in their kitchens, in their even in their guest bedroom, even their attic and loft, which is kind of scary. So we're figuring out how to work from home. That's going to be a big driver in how homes are designed going forward. But we think it has legs, and here's why. Because there's numbers behind it. Now, again, I might quibble a little bit with this 13 million, but this is nationwide. We think there are going to be millions of more people work from home post-pandemic than were working from home pre-pandemic. Fewer than now, but much more, even more so than was true before COVID-19 hit. And again, we'll see how many are kind of clawed back by their employer to the offices. But we're hearing now, through the rest of this year, a lot of those tech companies are saying you're good for the rest of this year to work from home. Some folks are even saying for 2 years, we're going to for sure let you work from home. And that's a big driver of why you're seeing people buy homes in places like Sacramento, because that would be a brutal commute into Cupertino if that were to happen. Now, here's what I want to talk about. So I'll end with this. The whole great migration we're talking about, it was partly to escape urbanness. I agree with that. I don't argue with that. You know, people were fleeing. They were scared to live urban. It was tougher to shelter in place in urban locations. They were doing that partly to get out of the current home. So for sure, there was design issues for that. I don't deny that at all. But mostly it was this ability to trade, or willingness to trade urban amenities for those bigger, cheaper homes in these safer, less congested communities, this suburbia. And all of that was, it's as simple as this, it was untapped by this work from home revolution. I know it sounds simple. It sounds like, as Ryan said, Captain Obvious, and it is, but in the new home world, a lot of people are talking about these other factors here, and we kind of forget a little bit about the obvious one, which is all these people in the Bay Area said, we're told they could work from home. They realized they can go to Tracy or Elk Grove or Folsom or Roseville and buy a much bigger house on a much bigger lot for a lot cheaper. And they'll worry about the commute later. Now, that's the billion-dollar question. It's not just, so Ryan mentioned foreclosure waves. One of the things that I'm concerned about is what happens when people do start getting pulled back to the office. What happens to places like Sacramento, which is not super commutable? I didn't show it up here, but the Upper Central Valley, places like Tracy, Manteca, Mountain House, have actually had better sales than Sacramento. And I would argue that's because those, in the back of their mind, those are commutable. You don't want to do that. It's a brutal commute, but that's a commutable option from Tracy into San Jose, more so than from Folsom or Elk Grove into San Jose. So what happens after folks are out of the office will be, are pulled back into the office, is going to impact Sacramento to a great deal. And that is all I have, I believe, Joel. Listen to the podcast. I have to say that here. There. That's my plug. John gets mad at me if I don't plug. So
Dean, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I look forward to watching that one again. All right, so our next presenters are going to be Thomas Hogan and Chris Irola. Chris is going to present first. Thomas, would you turn on your video?
All right.
There we go. And I'm now going to add Chris to us as well. All right, Chris, you can turn on your video. There we go. Okay, give me a minute. I'm going to first present Chris Irola, and then you, Thomas, and then I'm going to drop out and let you guys run with it. Chris Irola has been a professional licensed California realtor for the past 38 years and the CEO of Rent Pros Property Management for 32 years. And I guess I should clarify, he hasn't been acting as an agent for the last 38 years, or in property management. He has served on the board of directors for the local chapter of the California Apartment Association, where he was also chairman of the Government Affairs Committee. His company, Rent Pros, is the only management company awarded Property Management Company of the Year for the Rental Housing Association 5 years in a row. And in 2018, he founded the Rental Owners Association, serves small investment property owners through Northern California. Thomas Hogan earned his degree in behavioral psychology from Oregon State University and his Juris Doctorate from the University of Pacific McGeorge School of Law. He obtained his real estate license and his law license in 1991 and established the law offices of Thomas M. Hogan in 2003. He served as the legal advisory panel for Sacramento Rental Housing Association and the Rental Owners Association, as well as legal seminars for NARPM and Placer County Association of Realtors. So, Chris, you're the host, so you have the power. And as soon as you finish, then we'll switch it over to Thomas, and then you guys can talk back and forth.
Okay,
And he's gone. Oh, there you are.
I'm there.
You're there. You're on my left now.
Hang on a minute. Why do I have two of those open? What's going on here?
You're sharing your screen.
Man, I had this up working just fine. Why is it not working? Can you at least hear me, Tom?
We can hear you. We can see you. You're on the air. You're hot and live.
Yeah, but you can't see my screen, right?
Hey,
I can
Chris,
see your screen looking right at it.
Chris, unshare your screen and then hit share again on your PowerPoint.
So, Joe, what I'm seeing is you highlighted. I don't have any control over. I just see myself up in the corner.
Yes, so unshare your screen.
Chris, we can see your screen, so can you just
But
put
you
your
want,
PowerPoint on your main screen, maybe?
So I can't unshare my screen. There's no, oh, wait a minute. What's this over here? What's this doing over here? Oh. Switch to my other screen. Unshare my screen, huh? Hang on, help is on the way. Steve, what the heck is going on here? There's nowhere to say unshare my, stop share. There we go. Stop share. All right, did that stop sharing?
You just
Yeah.
lost your daytime Emmy, by the way, for best
I tell you.
technical director.
I didn't use any foul language. Okay, now look, let's try this again, huh? Let me get this baby open. It's been sitting here open the entire time until, of course, I need it. All right, now I'm going to share my screen. I don't know why it's up there twice, but it is. Share that. And it doesn't work. Hang on a minute.
Now we got your cow.
You can see that?
I can see your cow.
Oh, then hang on, hang on. Okay, is that full screen, cow?
Well, it's on the screen. I wouldn't call it full screen.
All right. Is it full screen? Is the PowerPoint full screen? The picture?
No, but I suggest we just move to the nuts and bolts.
Okay. Well, Joel changed my introduction a little bit, and it ended with, I live in Loomis with my cows, Oreo and Big Red. And I was going to see if you could tell why I named her Oreo, but let's move on. All right, so I am in the rental industry. As I mentioned here, I'm the, I own RentPros Property Management. And our industry has been greatly affected, probably more than any other sector in the real estate industry over the past year. In that we have had, Ben, go make sure that shows up right. In that we have had multiple orders, executive orders from our governor, hand down orders from the feds. Our assembly has passed bills that have tremendously changed our industry. And one of my realizations still today, after a year of this, is that a lot of investors, a lot of realtors still haven't got the memo. And what I mean by that is we're still operating. What's going on? You don't have anything on the screen. Jesus criminy, what's going on? Hang on, tech help is freaking here. God darn it.
I have some slides if you want me to throw them on. If Joel wants to make the host, I can
ridiculous.
share my PowerPoint, I hope.
Okay, so. You're the host? I'm the host. Okay, share screen. Why it's up there so many times, I have no idea. Oh, that's-
Well, we got the cow.
You're good. Why don't, am I good now? No, I'm not good. It's in presentation. Tom, why don't you go ahead? We got.
Okay, Joel, you want to give me the screen share abilities here?
This is bullshit. We don't. It's working now?
Yeah, our problem is we can't.
Okay, can you see that?
Well, Thomas has it now, so no one's gonna see mine. Mute me in case I get pissed off here, because it'll be right here for you.
Okay, so what we're looking at is AB 3088, and basically AB 3088 provides as part of it Code of Civil Procedure 1179.03.5, which sounds boring, but to a realtor it means before February 1, 2021, a court may not find a tenant guilty of unlawful detainer unless the court finds that the following applies, which is to say, it puts the whole state, including single-family homes, including condos, under eviction control. So if you have a property with a tenant inside, and maybe the tenant's paying below market rent, you're not going to be able to tell that tenant that they have to move out because they are protected. And if AB 15 passes, and you heard that it may go through June, the last draft of AB 15 I saw goes through December 31st. So we're not sure exactly where this ride stops, but AB 3088 requires just cause eviction for any tenant, and just cause means a residential property is, all residential property is under just cause. And that means the owner or buyer moving in for at least 12 months can be a reason. The tenant materially violating the lease, not cooperating with realtors to sell the house, which we get a lot of. The tenant just, is in the shower, taking a nap, whatever, doesn't want the realtor to come in, even after being given proper notice. And also not keeping the home in a clean condition, which is another issue that realtors have, is they walk in and the place is a mess, won't bring the best price. You can give tenants notices to clean the place up, to let realtors in. If they don't do that, then I've got something to work with. But otherwise, we're under 2 levels of moratoria. And of course, criminal nuisance. And we know that criminal nuisance includes shooting 2 or more of your roommates can be a criminal nuisance, setting fire to your house, dealing drugs, or breaking out windows because the neighbor didn't pay for their methamphetamine. Those are all considered criminal nuisances. And you might think I made those up, but actually I've experienced all of those in the last 6 weeks. So Chris, can you tell us what isn't a just cause for evicting someone?
Yeah, do we want to try this again or we just continue? Let's answer the question. Well, one of the most common things that's happening that I'm seeing is people are purchasing properties that are tenant occupied. And they're saying, okay, I purchased my property, I want to get my tenant out so you can manage it. And they didn't check to see before they purchased the property and learn that you cannot just give the tenant a notice to vacate. Notice to vacate for the cause or for the purpose of sale is not a just cause or a legitimate reason in the eyes of 1482 or any of these other tenant relief acts or eviction moratoriums that have come to pass here in 2020.
Right. So if you, and I made a list of things as examples for not just cause. For instance, you have a house on the market, the tenant gave a declaration under penalty of perjury that that they have a hardship under COVID-19. If you try to get rid of them because of that, then you may be responsible for retaliation. You may be subject to penalties. And I'll let Chris go into some of the penalties, but under federal law, we have the CDC order that an eviction of a tenant who's declared a hardship can result in 1 year in federal prison and a $500,000 fine. State and local gives you unlimited liability, which can include statutory penalties, attorney's fees, and civil damages from tenants that can claim a violation. So for instance, let's say you tell a tenant, hey, the owner's going to move in and live there for a year. What if the owner really never intended to do that? Well, that's fraud. And the tenant, if they find out from the neighbors or somebody else, or look on, look on social media and find out that property is for rent the day after they moved out, then that owner is maybe looking at spending all of their equity on attorney's fees and court costs. Rent control, currently all properties are under some version of rent control because we're in a state of emergency. Under a state of emergency, you cannot increase rents year over year more than 10%. California has been under a state of emergency, basically at least certain counties, since before 2017. So if you have a property, and where that comes in is if you have a property that's seriously under market.
CPI right now.
Yeah, your video's off, Chris. Did you want to?
He's got me off. He's got me turned off.
Okay.
Can't click it.
So if you have a property that's seriously under market, you're not going to come back in at anything above 10% per annum. And if it's rent controlled as multifamily, then it's going to be less than that. So you don't want to be in the gulag there with Solzhenitsyn. But the maximum penalties are pretty severe. So I would say it's really important for owners of rental property to check with legal authority or Chris or me or someone who knows, because it's easy to run afoul of all this. I'm gonna turn it over to Chris to flesh that out.
Okay, well, let's try this again. I just want to spend about 5 minutes sort of summarizing, actually emphasizing what Tom just said, and that is, if you are a property owner, if you're a realtor and you're dealing with a tenant occupied property, or an investor who's going to place a tenant in a property, make sure that you know who to ask before you start making decisions. I want to go through and quickly show you our process. For example, we get a very simple question: is my property under rent control? And the answer is, Tom just said, yes, all properties are under some kind of rent control right now. All these assembly bills and rent control ordinances that we're seeing primarily deal with two things, and that is the rent caps. That is how much you can increase your rents. Tom mentioned 10%. Well, actually, if it's a multifamily property, it's less than that. And then the other thing that these ordinances are all addressing are eviction. Now, evictions become a very broad term. It used to mean that we were taking somebody to court to actually move them out of the property. But as I read the language of all these bills, listen to the media, they're using eviction in a very broad sense, saying even asking a tenant to vacate, they're calling that eviction, which technically is not the case. But if you are involved in any of these kind of situations, your tenant isn't paying rent, tenant's causing property damage, evicting a tenant, understand that the old rules do not apply, because every property is subject to some kind of rent control. And that tells you what you can and cannot do when you want to increase the rent or you want to remove a tenant for any reason. Now, why is it important? Well, because the rules have changed and they're changing constantly. And Tom mentioned that there's some big fines in terms of, as low as $25,000 for violating portions of the CARES Act, all the way up to $250,000, $500,000 for doing things incorrectly. For example, you may give a tenant a notice to vacate when you should not have. Now, in the old days, it might have been the case that, oh, sorry, take that back. But now there are punitive damages for that. You give somebody the wrong notice, especially if they act on that notice and they move and they've now incurred costs and difficulty in moving and such, landlords could be very, very much on the hook for those costs. So if you're a realtor, don't be giving out advice unless you know for sure that you're giving out the correct advice. Now, let's take something very simple like a rent cap. I get this call all the time. Hey, I have this kind of property. How much can I raise the rent? Well, let me show you what we go through just to answer a question like that. I got these charts from the California Apartment Association, and we use these all the time. I have these up on a clipboard in my office. And this is a chart, and I won't go through all this and I don't expect anyone to memorize this, but frankly, when I hear agents or owners tell me, oh yeah, I'm very familiar with all the rules of 1482, I look at it and I go, I don't think you are, but okay. I mean, I don't say that, but I'm thinking that because look, here's page 1 of deciding how much I can increase the rent. Is the property in Sacramento? Yes. Well, then here's another flow chart you go to, because Sacramento has their own rules, as do many other cities. If it's not in Sac City, now is it subject to other rent controls? And what's the CPI? And when was the certificate of occupancy issued? And 15 more years ago, or 15, on and on and on, for page 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the flow chart that we use in order to determine how much you can raise your rent on a particular property. So typically an agent will call and say, hey, I have a quick question. How much can I raise the rent on this duplex? It may be a quick question. It's not always a quick answer, is my point. Excuse me. A second question we often get is, can I give my tenant a notice to vacate? And we get this all the time when the agents are preparing to sale. They don't ask this question. They usually call and say, can you send me the form to have my tenant vacate before I sell the property? Or an owner will call and say something like this. The answer is the same. We got to go to our flow charts and decide not only, well, first of all, if you can give a notice, and then if you can, what notice should we give? Because there are multiple notices. And what happens if you give the incorrect notice? Well, we go back up to our slide that showed the fines and the punitive damages and stuff. So my message for you today, if I have any message at all, it's that, yes, there's a lot of minutia and a lot of little rules and stuff, but we don't anticipate that anyone out in the real estate industry or even a professional property manager such as myself are going to have these memorized, but you should know where to get the information. I threw this in just to illustrate that each city has and county has authorization to create their own rules. And Sacramento City adopted a rule, their set of rules for raising rent and evicting tenants or asking tenants to move. It's called the TPRA, or the Tenant Protection and Relief Act. And here's another flow chart, if you will, that we go through to determine what we can and cannot do. So I'm just wanted to make you aware that, there is a process, there is a way, there are a lot of rules, and there's ways to work through that so that you make sure you always give the correct notice. And don't be like old Bullwinkle, if you're old enough to remember his character, Mr. Know-It-All, because that will get you or your potentially your client in a lot of trouble, and you don't want that. You agree, Tom?
Absolutely. Of course, when I had one opposing counsel who always called me Mr. Peabody.
Get it when I get it. All right, Joel, that's what I've got, and that's what I'm hoping to put forth today. I'm going to turn off my screen share here. Huh? All right.
Guys, thank you very much. That was great. So we're about ready to close out. Are there any questions for any of the panelists? Just type them into the Q&A.
Okay, so let's go through a couple of these. They're kind of sliding up. What if I shoot just one roommate? I'll leave that up to Tom. To clarify, if a buyer is moving to a single family, they can give the tenant a notice to vacate. Okay, there are some exceptions, aren't there, for if you want to have the tenant vacate the property. If the buyer is going to move into the property, then the question becomes, who gives the tenant the notice? Well, the seller can't give the tenant the notice. He's not moving into the property. It's got to be the buyer. So this is something that causes great complication when it comes to being practical. The requirement, and you watch me on this, Tom, make sure I got it right, is that you need to list the property, get into an escrow, and then give the notice to the tenant to vacate that the buyer is going to move into the property. So let's say you have a property and you don't know who's going to buy it, an investor, somebody who's going to live in the home. You have to put it up for sale with the tenant in occupancy, go through the whole showing process, everything of the sort, and then in escrow, give that tenant a notice to vacate. Take it one step further. What if the tenant decides not to vacate? Okay, so now you've given a notice, you have an owner ready to move in, and do you see how a short question becomes kind of a long answer? If that tenant doesn't vacate, well, we have an eviction moratorium, so you can't make them move.
Yes, you can. I'm just going to correct you on that.
Ask me, how?
Okay.
Well, that's eviction for cause, right?
Right, that's a just cause eviction. The issue is that at the time the notice is issued, only the owner, the seller, has standing to issue it. By the time the escrow closes, you have to make sure that the buyer's on board to back it up, because then the buyer or the seller, because the buyer has to enforce it. So, right now I've done probably 3 of those in the last few months of properties in escrow with a buyer moving in, and the seller, I write the notice, the seller has me serve it and assigns the right to act on it in an addendum so that the buyer can go forward after it's all done. Plus, my process server did it, so we don't have to call the buyer's agent or the seller's agent, 6 months from now to go to court. So
let me ask you this. I know we were in a position a while back where sheriffs were not going to go out and act on a writ. Are they willing to do that at this point in that instance?
Yes, the sheriffs will act on a writ if the court issues it. And of course, that's always the tricky part is will the court issue it? And we have had success, probably 4 out of 5 times to get the judge to actually come around and give us our judgments and issue our writs. But they're also very generous with stays of execution. So I had one individual got 4 stays of execution over 3 months.
So you could have a very unhappy buyer if they have trouble getting that tenant out. And it's not like the old days. You certainly can't give a notice prior to placing the property on the market. Another question I saw here was, I thought rent increase was 5% plus CPI for the region. Yeah, you'd mentioned, Tom, 10%. That's really single family homes.
Single family and condos are not subject to the to AB 1482, which is a statewide rent control.
Right.
Normally, Under non-rent controlled properties, the sky is the limit. Right now, 10% is the limit, or you could go to jail.
And for a multifamily, a non-owner occupied duplex and up, it is CPI plus, it's 5% plus CPI. CPI was at 3.3, 3.6, then 3.3. I'd have to look it up to see what it is
I believe
now.
it's currently 1%.
One, does it get down to 1 now? I know it was 1.8 for a while. We're basically, when we do a rent increase, we're basically 5%. We don't want to.
Your minimum.
Yeah.
Even if the CPI goes down, which is conceivable.
So this goes to also what we've seen, even on multiple listing right now, you can go out and find properties that are for sale and it'll say rents are low, owner can increase rent, there's room to increase the rent. Well, that may be true, but that rent's going to increase quite slowly compared to the past. And you may frankly never catch up if you can only go 5%, 6% annually.
Yeah.
So,
And from what I've seen and from our other presenters, you know, when you just bought a house that 3 years ago was 400,000, now it's 600,000, and you've got a tenant in there who's paying 1,600 in rent, that doesn't pencil out.
An important question, somebody's asking where they can get the flow charts. Don't use the flow charts I just put up if Joel sends these slides out, because the rules change and the flow charts change. They're not the same month after month. We have a whole host of new rules probably going to take effect here in just a couple of days at the end of this month. And these flow charts will have to be revised. I get those charts because I belong to the California Apartment Owners Association. You can also watch for our webinars. Tom and I do 2-hour seminars on some of this stuff, and we will be presenting those. Tom, this one I'll leave for you. If I want to remodel the property, can I remove the tenant?
7 months ago, yes. Now, no.
Yeah, I mean, there are some rules. If you're going to do a massive remodel that requires permits and such, I understand you can.
It has to be for habitability now. So the legislature in AB 3088 removed they anticipated that a lot of people would want to upgrade their properties once they found out they couldn't evict them for any other reason. So they took that off the menu.
Yes. I think that
if you're ordered by code enforcement or to correct an issue that substantially affects the habitability of the unit and requires at least 30 days. But if it's just to, you know, if it's elective surgery, no.
If you want to remodel one bath and there's another bath in that property, or remodel the kitchen, that's probably going to be a hard sell if the tenant challenged it.
Yeah, it's not going to fly at all. It has to be ordered by code enforcement or required for the habitability of the unit.
Michelle is asking, you mentioned a vote that will happen on Thursday, extending the moratorium until June. Is it possible that won't pass, or is it sure?
It wasn't me. It wasn't us. I think that was.
That was Ryan, right? We are in California.
But yeah, basically AB 15 and other measures are impending, and I don't even know why it's taken this long.
You know, I would not only guess that this one will pass, but I would guess that something along the lines of what Chu is proposing, and that it would be extending the moratorium, I hate to say it out loud, through the end of the year.
That was on the table. I don't know how long they're going to do it or if they'll do it incrementally. But the Fed extended theirs to March 31st, and if the Fed extended theirs to March 31st, usually expect California to double whatever the Fed does, at least.
So Susan Bennett asked a question. I'm going to defer to you, Tom. It said you can't give a notice to vacate. Can you give a notice to vacate and see if they move? What do you think about that ploy?
Well, I think if you give a notice to vacate and you state cause, like I have a lot of clients who say, well, I'm just going to move into the property. And then if you dig drill down a little bit and say, are you going to live in it as your primary residence for 12 months? They say, well, who's going to know? And well, the answer is the neighbor's going to know, and the tenant, as soon as they see it back on the rental market, are going to come back and sue you for not a small amount of money.
I think the spirit of the question is probably, testing the waters in the event of perhaps a possible sale. I want to sell, really like the tenant out. Let's just give them a notice and see if they vacate.
Yeah.
What are the dangers in doing that?
Well, I think it's problematic, especially if the tenant has stated, if one of the reasons, which is a common reason, a number of tenants, a percentage of them, I think it's probably less than 15% at this point, have turned in their declarations of COVID hardship and are not paying their rent, or are only paying a small portion. And a lot of landlords want to get rid of those folks as fast as they can. Now, if the reason you're selling or the reason you're giving that notice is because your tenant declared hardship and you give the notice and the tenant ends up vacating, moving in with family, getting sick, God forbid, or becoming homeless, then that's when your year in prison and your $500,000 fines start.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't test the waters that way. What if the tenant did move and now they're in a property that's $100 a month more, and later they determine, hey, I shouldn't have had to move because of some of the reasons you just mentioned. I don't know what the statute is on that, but I imagine at least a couple of years, you may be in it for moving expenses, paying their increased rent, and who knows what else. So you mentioned the other night, Tom, that we as realtors sometimes consider ourselves to be the great negotiators who can negotiate around and weave through and find ways to do things that we want to do. The people who wrote these assembly bills and the executive orders and stuff are veterans in this world and have closed every possible loophole that you and I might think of. These are the rules, and you need to really, really follow them. And anything you do that even gets on the border of what you can and can't do, it's a matter of risk. It's a matter of risk. You may get away with it and you may not. One more thing here, one more question, and then we'll finish it up. I've got, isn't a family member allowed to move in? Yeah, when we say owner moving in, it's owner or immediate family, including your spouse. So I've always said, I don't know why your spouse would move into your rental property. You wouldn't, but that's what's actually written in the law.
Yeah, there's actually you could almost do a table of consanguinity like they do in probate. You can go out to I think it's the first degree of consanguinity, which is basically parents, children, and spouses. It's the immediate.
Right.
So you can't go to cousins, uncles, and godfathers.
Okay, Joel, I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We really appreciate it. And we'll sign off for now. Until
All
next
right,
year.
thank you.
Thank you.